Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Man, what a movie this is. Going into this, I was both super duper excited, hyped up, but at the same time, of course I had concerns and I was worried as well because just last night I rewatched the first movie from 2018 and just saw how good that movie is once again. That first Black Panther movie, amazing. Honestly, one of my favorite MCU movies, definitely top 5 for sure, maybe even top 3. But obviously that then leads to huge expectations for a sequel. That first movie was huge. So to follow up after that, and then on top of that, having to do it without their lead, there's a lot of pressure on this movie. And so now I've seen it, and I gotta say, it did definitely live up to the hype, and I really, really enjoyed Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So this is going to be my non-spoiler review. No spoilers here if you haven't seen it yet, because it just came out yesterday, or technically the night before. If you haven't seen it yet, that's all right, because we're not talking spoilers. My full spoiler review, breakdown, ending explained, all that stuff will be out a little later. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. We'll see. Just depends on timing and all that stuff. But for now, let's talk non-spoilery about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And, probably the first thing we should talk about is just, the elephant in the room. The big thing going in this movie is the absence of Chadwick Boseman. The big struggle that this movie was faced with, which is just like it's a controversial thing because some people were like, okay, we should recast T'Challa. Some people agree with Marvel Studios' decision to kill off the character of T'Challa. And I'll say right off the bat, I think they handled it beautifully. Like, I don't think they could have done it more perfectly, at least in the way that they went about doing it with killing off the character. Because it's a really emotional movie because it all kind of focuses around the death of that character and the death of T'Challa. And, it is weird because you lose that big male presence here, and it is much more female-centric around this time, which, honestly, great. I think that was a great element to it. And his absence is felt. It does feel like something's missing, but at the same time, this does feel like Shuri's movie. Like, at least after the beginning, like certain parts of the middle when there's no references to T'Challa and they're focusing on the task at hand here with the battle between Wakanda and Talokan, and there's no, mention of that. It doesn't feel it, or at least I didn't feel like, oh, this feels weird because Chadwick Boseman and T'Challa isn't here. Definitely the movie overall, it is kind of like, think about like, oh man, I wish he was here. And obviously we all do, but I think that it worked even without him. And the way that they handled his death, the funeral was really beautiful. Obviously, we got glimpses of that in the trailer. One of the best parts about that first Black Panther movie was just getting to explore the African culture and the culture and the world of Wakanda. So to bring in a new element to that, here seeing the kind of celebration of life for T'Challa was amazing. And just the fact that, with this movie, the acting was across the board off the charts. It was a phenomenal performances from everyone, and one of the big reasons for that is because for a lot of them it wasn't acting, just how like the actors in real life were still mourning and grieving the loss of Chadwick Boseman, just as the characters were mourning and grieving the loss of King T'Challa. And like I said, this moves on to Shuri, his sister, being the lead of this film. And I think the transition to that, it is a little wonky at first, especially just looking at where the character is in the first movie, and she's a very major just side character. But bringing her to the forefront here and the journey she goes on throughout this film, I think was super powerful. Having her go from just being the tech genius to just being the sister of the king, just the princess of Wakanda, to grieving the loss for a brother and becoming so much more than that by the end of the film. But by far, my favorite part, though, has to be Namor the Submariner, because Namor was awesome. Tenoch Huerta was amazing in the role, bringing the whole aspect of the Latino and Mexican and Mayan culture to Talokan and this whole underwater civilization was a great idea, because in the comics, that none of that is there at all. In some versions, Namor is depicted as Asian. So for them to change it for this, I think it just added so much more to his character and to the culture. The fact that this was a Mayan civilization that went to start this new tribe, this new world underwater, and the whole way they explained that, how that all got started, flashbacks and everything, it was great. It was beautiful to witness. And Namor himself is just so cool because he's so comics accurate. I mean, you got the look, the pointy ears, the wings on his feet, even right down to the little green Speedo, which I love how Tenoch Huerta talking in interviews referred to those as his shame shorts, because I mean, you gotta imagine that's pretty awkward just walking around set all day just wearing tiny little green shorts, which are like shorts. But Namor was great here, and the best part is he really gets to be a villain. This has been one of the main problems with the MCU in all of its existence, is it's had a villain problem. And we've seen that especially in Phase 4, but this is an amazing villain because he gets to be a villain. You feel the stakes. He is willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish his goals. Just like how Killmonger in the first Black Panther movie, you see where he's coming from. You see why he's doing what he's doing. You can almost side with him. You can see, like, you know, hey, this guy's, you know, he's doing it for these reasons, and I understand that. But then again, he kills people, and you're like, okay, yeah, he's the bad guy. But he serves as such a perfect villain for this film and bounces off so well against Shuri. Just that relationship, I think, was really interesting to tackle here. Now, as for some of the other supporting characters we had in the film, of course, Okoye is here, taking on a little bit of a different role than I expected. And M'Baku doesn't really have a whole lot to do, but I did like what he did. Nakia was pretty interesting, especially towards the end. Let's see, Ironheart. Dominique Thorne makes her MCU debut here as Riri Williams, aka Ironheart. And another one of my favorite parts of the film. Riri Williams has always been a character that I've never had a super whole lot of interest in. I've just been like, oh, it's just Iron Man, but a teenage girl. Like, I don't really like that idea. But we know she's getting her own Disney Plus series, and so I was like willing to give her a chance. And when we saw her in this movie, she was just great. She was great for comedic relief, which obviously makes sense because she's one of the characters that's not having to deal with the loss and grieving. So she was a much more upbeat character. And I just loved, especially her relationship with Shuri as well. Kind of how in the first film you had that mentor-mentee relationship, now bringing it into the second film, where now Shuri is the mentor and she is has now Riri Williams as her mentee. Those two working together in the science lab, those were some of my favorite parts. Just seeing those two, kind of like, you know, we always love Tony Stark and Bruce Banner together as the science bros. Well, these are the science gals right here. I mean, they were awesome. I just loved them on screen together. Her Ironheart suit was great. I love how she had obviously her proto suit that she made herself in her garage, and then obviously, you know, her final suit, which we've seen in promo art and concept art and all that stuff as well. And another thing is that this movie explores obviously how the first film ended with opening up Wakanda to the world. And that was something that I wasn't really sure how they were going to explore, because we didn't see really much of that in the trailers. But the way they do some of those scenes of the United Nations were really, really interesting, really captivating. How all of this connects to Talokan as well. That whole spark that ignites the flame to commence this battle and this war between these two nations, I thought was executed really, really well. And I really enjoyed that. The whole involvement of vibranium. And there were also a lot of surprises here. Wakanda Forever is filled with surprises that even me, as somebody who's, you know, obviously I've covered the movie quite a bit here on the channel in the recent years. So I knew a lot about this movie going into it, but there were still a lot of surprises. There were cameos that I didn't expect. And there is, of course, a mid-credit scene as well, which you're definitely going to want to stay around for. So overall, I really enjoyed this. One minor nitpick, which is kind of like actually a major nitpick that I really did not like about this movie, and really is the only main thing that I disliked about Wakanda Forever is just that there were a lot of scenes, especially towards the beginning of the film, at least the first half, that were just super dark. Like scenes that would take place at night and there's like barely any lights there. You could not really see what's going on. And that kind of connects to Talokan, where some of the scenes, at least when we first got down there, it was just so dark underwater that you could barely see what was going on. This is going to be a film that's going to be, I think, much better to watch at home on a TV, because you can really, get an up close personal look at all these scenes and see what's actually going on there. But speaking of Talokan, one other thing I did want to mention is obviously there's going to be a comparison between Namor and Aquaman. Oh, this is just Marvel's Aquaman. Well, Namor came first technically in the comics. But I do think I still prefer DC and Aquaman's adaptation of Atlantis, because this is Talokan, but it's basically Atlantis. They're just giving it a different name here, and I do like the Aquaman's version of Atlantis more, just because it's a lot more brighter, it's a lot more colorful. Like I said, this one is much more darker. When you do really get into like the capital of Talokan, it is really beautiful. There are some cool, shiny, sparkly stuff. But another thing is that they shot Aquaman dry for wet, whereas this, they actually had people in water tanks. They actually filmed stuff underwater, which is cool, but I still prefer how it was done in Aquaman when it comes to the underwater stuff. But other than that, Wakanda Forever, amazing film. I do think I still prefer the first movie overall. This one is quite a long movie, and you do feel the runtime a little bit, especially towards the beginning, where it's like, oh my god, you still got like 2 hours of this thing, because the movie's almost 3 hours long. But especially towards the end, you don't feel it. I feel like they utilized their time really well. And what we got from Wakanda Forever was the perfect sequel to the first film, the successful first film of Black Panther. And with what they had to work with here, with, of course, having to tell the story of the death of T'Challa, while also bringing in Talokan and Namor and, bringing up a new Black Panther, all that stuff, I think it was done really, really well. Ryan Coogler, really knocked it out of the park once again here with Wakanda Forever. Are we going to get Black Panther 3? I don't know. We'll see. I'll definitely be talking about that along with the post-credit scene and some of the other spoilery stuff that happened in this movie in my spoiler review and breakdown. But for now, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Of course, non-spoiler thoughts on Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this video and hit the subscribe button so I keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the Marvel life.